Hello everyone, we are back with another video. This week I am going to be covering mostly citations and things like that for you. So that's something that I've gotten a lot of questions about, and as far as learning new information, we are really just focused on writing our papers. That's what you should be focusing on this week. Is working on your paper, writing your paper. If you want to do that early turn in, that day is this Saturday, April the 17th. And so if you are going to want to turn it in and do the early grading and then let me grade it, give it back to you, and then you can either keep that grade or you can revise and turn it in for the original due date. Whichever one you want to do, just remember that that date is this Saturday the 17th. So make sure that you turn it in by then. Speaking of, make sure that you go into your, where you turned in your thesis statements under the Dropbox there. I have commented on everyone's, it should be on there. See, it's all blank. Where I've commented on everybody's. Make sure that you go in and look at my comments there, because there's a lot of people who, even though I've expressed many times that it needs to be, your thesis needs to be in the claim because reasons format, and you were doing full sentence, topic sentences and that kind of stuff. I got thesis statements that weren't arguments and they weren't in the right format, and then the topic outline was just a few phrases here and there, but they weren't sentences. So that is, if you look at your grade, the way I graded it was how complete it was, not whether it was correct or not. So even if you got a 100 on it, that just means you did it and you turned it in. But look at my comments, because almost everybody, I can't think but of maybe 2 or 3 people out of all the classes that actually do not need to revise. So make sure that you go in there and you look at all those. And you'll notice that not everyone turned one in either. So if it's something you have not turned in yet, make sure that you do that. But I also, while I'm in the Dropbox here, notice that if you are doing the early grading, make sure you turn it in to this Dropbox. So this is the one where I will pull from for early grading, and it's, like I said, due on April the 17th. So make sure that that is where you turn it in. If you turn it in here, I'm not necessarily going to notice it. So make sure that you turn it into this particular Dropbox. And you must turn it in by the 17th at 11:59. This Dropbox will close and you won't be able to turn it in. Anything that's in this Dropbox, I grade after anything in this Dropbox, the final draft, I grade after the 23rd. If you don't turn this in by the 17th, it won't let you, and everything will be graded after the 23rd on that original due date. So make sure that if you are turning it in early for early grading, you get it in on time. That also means don't wait until the last minute, and because if the Wi-Fi is not working, that's not going to be a super fun time for you, I suppose. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time to turn it in. All right. Also, I wanted to point out something before we go into citations and things like that. I wanted to point something out to you. I had several students tell me that they really use that outline that they used that I gave you for the lit review and the sample paper, being able to look at it. So I did another one for this research paper. I created an outline, and it's very not detailed at all outline. And then I actually took one of my papers I wrote for grad school, which was originally 15 pages, and I cut it down to be more manageable for you to look over, and color coded it to use as a sample for the research paper. So if you look under the sample papers, under the content, you will see this. So I created the sample research paper outline, and if you'll notice here, it says this is an overall example of how you can set up your research paper. So there's no real content in here. This is just a way to create a real general outline. So imagine each one of these things, and I'm talking about the Roman numerals, and I'm talking about the letters here, as a separate paragraph. So individual paragraphs. So that means if you count all these up, there's actually 16 here. So you would have 16 paragraphs in this paper, which sounds like a lot, but remember, you are writing a 7-page paper. So 16 paragraphs, that averages out to be 2 to 3 a page. So that's not really that much. So I also created some sample paragraphs to explain something on here. that may be a little bit confusing about using each one of your main points for your thesis statement. So this is just, as I notice right here, this is just one example of an organizational strategy. So you should have all the elements. In other words, everything that has a Roman numeral in front of it, you should have a paragraph at least about each one of those. However, you might, this one has 3 examples, this one has 3, you may have 3 here and 2 here or something like that. So you may have a different number of examples, or you may organize it slightly differently. I have the counter argument here. You may put the counter argument here. You may start with a counter argument. Organize it however works best for you and your topic, but you should have all of these elements in your paper. So the first element is obviously your intro paragraph. So that includes the thesis in that claim because reasons format. And again, go back and look at the comments that I made on your papers, because a lot of people either didn't even do that, even though I've been talking about it since the beginning of the semester. Make sure you go back and you've got it in that format, and that you've got an argumentative claim, and then you've got the reasons after it. It says first sentence, but it should be the last sentence there, so we'll change that. But your thesis should be the last sentence of that paragraph. Now, once you go on to the next one, the next paragraph, and this is what I'll show you in my example paper that I have, is I did include background information on the topic. So what's the topic that you're talking about? The topic in my sample paper is about using historical fact when you're writing historical fiction papers. So I give a little information about what a historical novel is and why it's important, just like using historical fact, just the history of it. So giving a little background information, like say, for example, I know several people are writing about the Black Lives Matter movement. So giving a little background about where that started, who started it, why it started, all of that. Put a paragraph or 2 in there to introduce the audience and give them some of that background information that they may not know, that they will need to understand as you start going through your argument. Plus, it adds a couple more paragraphs to your paper as you are trying to reach those 7 pages. Then you've got your 3 main points. And I have not done this properly, but first, second, and third it should be. Now, again, you can organize these however you want. So you're not just going to write one paragraph about each main point, because you're not going to be able to fill up 7 pages. So you have an intro that gives maybe a little background about each main point, about a main point on here. And then you are going to possibly give an example, or you're going to talk about a different source material that you might be using there. Or you may use just different evidence or different analysis. So you're probably going to write at least 3 to 4 paragraphs about each one of your main points. So think of this almost like a little mini essay about each main point. So you have an intro paragraph that kind of explains you restate your thesis, your argument, and then connect your main point to it, explain why it's important, and then you come down here and start using source material and examples and different kind of sub points underneath it. So think of this almost like a little mini essay that goes along with each one of your main points, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So you're going to do that for your 3 points. And again, organize those however you feel it works best in your paper. And then you should somewhere in there have a counter argument. So in other words, if you had to argue the other side of your claim, how would you argue it? What's the other side of the argument? You present that, and then you refute that counter argument. So you present the other side, but then you say, however, this viewpoint is not as valid because, and you use some of your analysis and evidence there to refute or to go against that particular argument. Then you must have a conclusion that includes a restatement of the thesis as the first sentence. So remember, go back and review how to do the intros and conclusions, where your intro starts out very general and gets down to that very specific thesis, and then your conclusion goes the opposite way. It starts out very specific with a restatement of your thesis, and then kind of works your way out of the topic to get more general. So I did a little example, and this is actually copied and pasted from the sample paper that I gave you. And this is just talking about Just to give you a general idea, it's talking about when properly researched, accurate historical details not only contribute to the authenticity of the story, which is the first point that I made in the story. That's how we're creating transitions from one point to the next. They also help readers examine the problems of today in an updated but historical context. So that is what I am arguing here. And I've got 4 paragraphs right here. And so that's my kind of mini thesis about why you should use historical details to help people understand the historical context of problems that are something that's still an issue today. This particular one that I'm talking about is racism, and I'm using the example of the book To Kill a Mockingbird. And so this is almost like my little intro into the topic. So presenting universal conflicts in different historical periods allows readers to examine today's same problems in a new context. Also, when adaptations of historical novels are set in a new time period, writers should change details to fit the new setting. A character encountering racism in 1856 would have a very different experience from one facing racism in 1956 or 2016. So that's kind of an introduction. So we know what we're going to be talking about is looking at how the historical context of racism in different eras of literature, and we're going to specifically look at Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. So, like racism, many issues people face today are not new, but their dynamics have changed over time. Recently, there has been an uproar over racially charged language in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. While referring to an African-American character with such a graphic racial epithet strikes readers as abhorrent today, the language used in the book is accurate for 1936 Alabama. Biloxi, Mississippi schools recently banned the novel, once a staple of their 8th grade reading list. Kenny Holloway, vice president of the Biloxi School Board, told the local Biloxi newspaper, the Sun Herald, "There is some language that makes people uncomfortable, and we can teach the same lesson with different books." And then I put a citation, which we will actually look at these same paragraphs for the citations. Of course, the language makes readers of today uncomfortable. To say race relations at that time in the South were uncomfortable is an understatement. The term that shocks readers today was part of regular conversation at that time. Removing the text from the curriculum deprives students of a level of understanding of their past. So you can see how I introduced, the whole point is to look at today's problems through different time period lenses through literature. That's what we're covering here. And then I go on to use an example. Okay, we're talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, and we're talking about this guy here showing how it was banned, and then this guy is trying to explain why it was banned, because it made people uncomfortable. And as I always say, nothing ever changes when you just stay in your comfort zone. So I go on and I use an example of something that he said. And then I go on to talk about some other things related to it. So this is kind of the other side of that, where people are saying it shouldn't be banned because it's something that young people hear. It's a terminology that young people hear all the time. And having this book, reading about it, helps them understand the historical context and use of the word and the past of the word. So that's what this particular part of the argument is, because the same newspaper who quoted the first guy saying that it made people uncomfortable is saying the editorial board talks about how they can't even print the word, but that school children hear it every day. And that it's racism is far too prevalent in our society, just like it was in 1930s Alabama Harper Lee wrote about, and then goes on to say that they're banning that book means that kids miss out on discussing the issue. Just ignoring an issue doesn't mean that it goes away. So that's the part of this argument. And then I'm still using more examples, and I'm still expanding on it. I'm still using analysis to talk about reading about history in a history book is one thing, but experiencing history through literature allows students to understand a whole new perspective. So I'm still focusing. Everything is all about looking at problems through different contexts based through literature, and how it's important that it be historically accurate. So that's what I'm arguing through this whole paper, but I take 4 paragraphs here to talk about this one particular issue. So that's something you should definitely look at. So look over that to kind of explain. So these 4 paragraphs would be an example of this. So the intro that kind of explains what I'm going to talk about, and then I've got an example, and I've got several different pieces of evidence with my analysis that goes along with it. So look over that, and if you have any questions about that, please let me know. And then we will also I'm going to look at this is the sample research paper. So this is the actual paper itself. Like I said, I cut it down because it was 15 pages, and I figured you didn't want to read 15 pages. And I didn't want to have to figure out how to color code 15 pages because I, again, color coded this. Unfortunately, I ran out of light colors. And so some of these are a little bit darker and kind of maybe a little bit harder to read. Maybe that'll help a little bit. So if you look through this paper, and I'm not going to go through I think it's 9 pages now. I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can see within the paper, the yellow part is the thesis. Actually, this whole thing is the thesis. And then everything that discusses the first reason, second reason, third reason are in those colors. And then I also have the counter argument and then the background color coded. So you can see at the end of my intro, I've got my thesis statement. While historical novels will inherently be fiction, it is important for writers to stay true to the historical times or events about which they are writing. Oh, there's a claim. There's my argument. Because it gives an authenticity to the story. Detailed historical research allows readers to examine universal problems in true historical context, and they show respect for the experiences of the people who lived through those times and events. So these are my 3 reasons, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this paper. Now, I start out with some background. I've got 2 paragraphs talking about historical novels and using historical facts and different things like that. So I have that, and then I go on to start talking about the first reason. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs about the first reason. And again, imagine this as its own little mini thesis. So you could pull out just this blue part and read it by itself, and it could work as kind of like a mini thesis or a mini essay about that particular reason, which allows readers to create an authentic story and gives ethos and validity to their writing. So that would be what this particular little tiny essay would be about. And then I go on to the second reason, which again, this is what we were just looking at actually, but you could pull that out and make it its own little kind of mini essay in itself. And then I present my counter argument, and I only have 1 paragraph for that. Yours may be 2 paragraphs. I actually had another counter argument that was 2 or 3 paragraphs, but again, my paper was getting really long, and so I decided just to keep one of the counter arguments in here. And then my third reason, all this green, and then I've got my conclusion. So, and this is actually restatement of my thesis here. I guess I could highlight that yellow. While historical fiction is fiction, the historical setting means the writer must ground the story in fact. So that's pretty much, I don't have my reasons on here, but that's my claim. And then of course I have my works cited page here. So, but anyways, both of those are available for you to look at. I'm going to go over these in class to make sure that you look at those. It's under the sample papers and class handouts. Okay, so the main point of today is we are going to look at how to include citations in your writing, because I had a lot of people who have asked questions about this, that they don't understand how to do citations, where to put citations, things like that. So let's look at this paragraph, which we actually just read, but I have highlighted all the outside information. I did 2 of those paragraphs, and I highlighted the information that's from outside sources. So, like racism, many issues people face today are not new, but their dynamics have changed over time. Recently, there has been uproar over racially charged language in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. While referring to an African American character in such a graphic racial epithet strikes readers as abhorrent today, the language used in the book is accurate for 1936 Alabama. Biloxi, Mississippi, schools recently banned the novel, once a staple of their 8th grade reading list. Kenny Holloway, vice president of the Biloxi School Board, told the local Biloxi newspaper, the Sun Herald, "There is some language that makes people uncomfortable, and we can teach the same lesson with different books." So, we know here we've got a quote because there's quotation marks around it. We also have created an introductory phrase here. We've giving some information or letting you know, hey, there's a quote or there's some information from an outside source coming, because you know that, like, this is not me. You know, this is Kenny Holloway. Who's that? Well, we're going to find out. Vice president of the Biloxi School Board told the local newspaper. So we know here what source this is coming from, the Sun Herald. And then we need to figure out what we're going to put here. So let's look at the work cited. So this is from this one, actually. Why does the Biloxi School District pull To Kill a Mockingbird from the 8th grade lesson plan? That's from actually this story right here. And I accessed it really soon after they did it. But there's no page numbers here. So it would be hard to put any kind of page numbers there. But usually, and I'm going to show this video in class, but make sure you watch it. I put a link to it that shows, it's from Purdue Owl, that shows how to do in-text citations. It's a different way to show you. Usually you need to have whatever the information is, the first thing that you see right here. I should see that in your citation or your signaling phrase. So we've got Karen Nelson here. And so if we go back and look, Nelson's name is not anywhere in here because she's the one that wrote the story, but this is the person who said the quote. So we need to put her name as a citation. Now, one thing that y'all should notice is I have a period here, but when you add a citation, it actually goes within your sentence. So I put my citation and then I put my period after it. So there should be a space there after the end of your quotation, and then within the sentence, you should have your citation. So, of course, the language makes readers today uncomfortable. To say race relations at that time in the South were uncomfortable is an understatement. A term that shocks readers today was part of regular conversation at that time. Removing the text from the curriculum deprives students of a level of understanding of their past, even if it's painful to relive. Okay, the banning of To Kill a Mockingbird elicited cries of censorship from opponents who believe 8th graders can handle the terminology. The Sun Herald even published, so now we know, mentioning the name of the publication again is a signal, hey, I'm about to get information from somewhere outside of this person's brain. So you should be including these too when you're writing. The Sun Herald even published an editorial criticizing the decision. In it, writers from the editorial board of the newspaper mentioned the use of the racial slur, noting that it is too offensive for them to even print, but that school children hear that word more often than they should. The writers go on to state, and racism, unfortunately, is far too prevalent in our society, just as it was in 1930s Alabama, Harper Lee wrote about. So, we've got not only, of course, we have a quote here, sure, but we also, this is considered information from them too, because I'm telling you what this article is about. This is just not word for word what they say, but this is a paraphrase. So I'm putting a chunk of their article into my own words there, that all of this comes from the same source. So where will I put the citation? At the same place after all of the information. So remember, take that period out, because you are going to, actually, I think this one is the other one. So this is the editorial board. So that's who they listed, quote unquote, as the author, because it was more than one writer, but they just didn't actually say who all the people were. So I just put the editorial board there because that is what I'm going to see first when I start looking at the works cited page. But I've got, like I said, a combo of paraphrase and a quote here. But after all the information about it, that's where I put that particular citation. Now, the writers of the Sun Herald editorial believe banning that particular book means kids today miss out on discussing an issue that not only shaped the history of the South, but an issue that still exists today. It is important for students to understand the history and meaning behind the word they hear and use so often, sometimes without thought. So this is my analysis. So this part is coming from me. That's why I'm not putting a citation after it. I'm explaining this is why it's important. This is why I use this quote. But then I go on to, and it also connects to this. So I've got some analysis, even though this particular paragraph ends with a quote. This analysis that comes before it actually leads up to this quote. So this particular bit of my analysis is saying why this part's important, how it relates to the argument, and also how this quote at the end relates. By removing Mockingbird, Biloxi has missed a wonderful opportunity to have a frank discussion with their children why reasonable people go stark raving mad, which is actually a quote from To Kill a Mockingbird. Perhaps if we talked about race more, there would be fewer people cavalierly tossing out hurtful racist language. So, again, we got a quote. So, within the sentence, so it goes after the quotation, the editorial. It's weird to try and type while I'm looking at down and trying to record myself. So, there we go. Now we've got the citations in for all of the outside information within this. And then we've got, you can see on the works cited page, like this is where it's connected here. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit better. Anytime that you've got any outside information, if you're talking about anything from any of your sources, I have to see this citation, some kind of citation after that particular information. And sometimes people go, well, I just don't know what to put in there. Put something. It's better to have a citation with something. Again, at least the first thing that I see on the works cited page should be in there, especially if it's not mentioned in the signaling phrase. You notice, since I've said Sun Herald several times, I don't put Sun Herald here because you already know that. Sun Herald's right there. So I've got the editorial board. This came from the Sun Herald. This is this guy. It's got all this stuff, but it didn't have the name of the author anywhere in here, and so that's what I put in the citation. But it's better to have something there and it be wrong. You put the title of the article in there when it doesn't necessarily need to be there, or you put the date, or you put something. It's better to have that there and that be wrong. I'm not going to count off nearly as much, or maybe anything, having that citation in there with some kind of information that I can use, than if there's no citation whatsoever. If you don't put citations in your paper, that is considered plagiarism, which earns you a 0, which I know no one wants. So make sure that you are putting those citations in there. And that is what your quiz is going to be about this week as well, is going to be where to put a citation. Remember, like I said, you're putting it within the sentence that you are referring to. Sometimes people with the period and then put the citation. That is wrong. It goes before the period or before whatever punctuation it is. And we'll look at that. What's the correct citation to use and that kind of stuff. So make sure that you've reviewed that. And also, I won't play it right now, but another source that you can always look at is Purdue Owl. So Purdue Owl is something that is always going to be good for you to use as a source of information. So the MLA formatting and style guide, you have got all of this information here, and it's got videos. And in fact, this particular video is the one that I'm going to show during class. I won't show it here because I don't know how it works. If I'm on a YouTube video showing someone else's YouTube video, it's probably not allowed, so I'm not going to do that. But all the information, go away video. All the information about how to do, you've got in-text citations, the basics. This explains how to do this. So you can look right here. Why do these videos just want to keep coming up? So it shows you the different ways to do it, why you have to do it. And then it also is going to show you how to do your works cited page as well. So using the MLA page from Purdue Owl is something that's really important you can use. The MLA handbook is something that you can use that's really, really well done, that you can find all this information. So make sure that you're using those resources when you are looking for something looking for information as far as how to format your citations and where to put those citations in. So make sure you use those. And if you still have questions, as always, ask me. You don't necessarily have anything due this week. Just be working on your paper unless you're going to turn in for early grading. That is due on Saturday, April the 17th. But if you have any questions as you're writing, if you're wondering if you're doing things properly, or you're getting it, you're putting it in the right format, or you're doing things the right way, then please just let me know. This is also, I just happened to think of this. Before I leave you, there is a form. A lot of times people had issues with formatting. So this is something that you can check out here as well. If you look at templates here, there is a template in Word. Hold on. I think I can find it. I think it's in a weird place. I saw it one time before. Here we go. MLA style paper. There is a format that it does it for you. So I get so many things that are formatted incorrectly. In Word, there is an option for opening up an MLA style paper. So gives you all the information how to set it up, your title. It shows how to format everything. It even has stuff like tables, and you're not going to use pictures and figures and that kind of stuff in there. But it's got all of those things. It also shows you how to do your works cited page. So you can use that. You can also, if you go to, I'm just going to open up in my Gmail there, I guess. We'll do it like this. And then if you go to Google Docs, there is a template gallery for that as well. Report MLA style. So if you use Google Docs, you have that option too. So you are able to just kind of fill in how all your writing, but it's already formatted for you. So those are definitely some things that you need to use. This also is connected to EasyBib too, which again, even if you're using EasyBib, make sure you check them and make sure that they are correct, because they don't always format those properly, but you have this option where it shows you how everything's all kind of laid out for you, and you just pretty much just type it in. So these are resources that you definitely should be using. And if you have any questions as you are working, as always, please feel free to ask me. Have a lovely day.